They removed me from the family group chat on a Tuesday morning while I was watering my desert roses. The notification sound stopped, and suddenly, the constant stream of messages about birthday parties, school events, and weekend plans went silent. 43 years of family memories, reduced to digital exile with the tap of a finger. So I did what any self-respecting grandmother would do. I called my lawyer and had them all removed from something far more permanent. Before we jump back, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Khyla Martinez, and at 71 years old, I thought I had learned all the ways a family could break your heart. I was wrong. I had spent most of my life in the sprawling suburbs of Phoenix, Arizona, where the summer heat could melt your resolve and the winter sunshine could heal your soul. My husband, Roberto, and I had built our life here, raising 3 children in an adobe-style home with a backyard that bloomed with prickly pear cactus and desert marigolds. Roberto passed 5 years ago, leaving me with a house too big for one person and a family that seemed to forget I existed unless they needed something. I had worked as a school secretary for 37 years at Desert Ridge Elementary, where I knew every child's name, every parent's face, and every teacher's coffee order. The kids called me Mrs. K, and I loved watching them grow from gap-toothed kindergartners to confident 5th graders ready to take on the world. When I retired, the silence in my house felt deafening. That's when my daughter Carmen suggested I get a smartphone. "Mom, you need to stay connected," she said, setting up the family group chat that would eventually become my undoing. The group chat was called Martinez Family Updates, and for 2 years, it was my window into their lives. I saw photos of my grandchildren's soccer games, screenshots of report cards, pictures of family dinners I wasn't invited to. I contributed when I could, sharing photos of my garden, asking about everyone's day, sending heart emojis and encouraging messages. I thought I was part of their digital family circle. I thought wrong. The signs started small, the way betrayal always does. My messages would sit there, unread for hours while others responded immediately to each other. When I shared news about my doctor's appointments or my volunteer work at the community center, the responses were brief. "That's nice, Mom." "Good for you, Abuela." But when my son Miguel posted about his promotion at work, the congratulations poured in like rain in the desert. When my youngest daughter Sophia announced her engagement, the chat exploded with excitement, wedding planning, and celebration. I sent my love and congratulations, but my message seemed to disappear into the digital void, acknowledged by no one. I began to notice the gaps in conversation, references to events I hadn't heard about, inside jokes that excluded me. "Remember what happened at brunch yesterday?" Carmen would write, and others would respond with laughing emojis. I never knew about any brunch. "Thanks for helping with the move, everyone," Sophia posted, and I realized I hadn't even known she was moving apartments. When I asked about these things, the responses were always the same. "Oh, it was last minute, Mom. We didn't want to bother you. You seemed busy with your garden club." The truth was, I wasn't busy. I was lonely. After Roberto died, the days stretched long and quiet. My garden was beautiful, but it didn't laugh at my jokes. My books were companions, but they didn't call to check if I was okay. The group chat had become my connection to the family I had raised, fed, and loved for decades. It was my proof that I still mattered in their busy lives. I started taking screenshots of the conversations, not out of paranoia, but out of a growing sense that something was shifting beneath my feet like desert sand in a windstorm. I printed them out and kept them in a folder, studying the patterns of communication like I used to study student attendance records. The evidence was clear. They talked to each other constantly, but their responses to me grew shorter, less frequent, more perfunctory. I was becoming a digital afterthought in my own family. The breaking point came during Miguel's son's birthday party planning. The chat buzzed with activity for days, location discussions, cake flavors, gift coordination, decoration, themes. I watched it all unfold like a television show I wasn't invited to join. When I offered to bring my famous tres leches cake, the one I had made for every family birthday for 20 years, Carmen responded that they had already ordered from a bakery. When I asked about the time and location, Sophia said she would text me separately. She never did. I found out about the party through a Facebook post 3 days later. Photos of my grandson blowing out candles, surrounded by aunts, uncles, and cousins I recognized. Everyone was there except me. In one photo, I could see my tres leches cake on the dessert table, the one Carmen said they didn't need. My daughter-in-law Maria had made it instead, and the family had praised her for the new recipe she had tried. That night, I sat in my kitchen with a cup of chamomile tea staring at my phone. The group chat showed no new messages. I typed and deleted a dozen different messages. Why wasn't I invited? I thought we were family. What did I do wrong? But I deleted them. All. Instead, I set my phone aside and walked out to my back patio, where the desert air was finally cooling after another scorching day. My patio was my sanctuary, decorated with hand-painted talavera pots filled with succulents and desert blooms. Roberto had built me a pergola before he got sick, and I had strung lights across it that twinkled like stars. A small fountain bubbled in the corner, attracting the occasional hummingbird. It was peaceful here, away from the digital noise and family drama. I sat in my favorite weathered wooden chair and let the silence wash over me. I thought about the woman I used to be, the one who organized every family gathering, who remembered every birthday and anniversary, who kept photo albums and made sure everyone felt included. I thought about Roberto, who used to joke that I was the family's social director. "Without you, Misha," he would say, "they'd all scatter like tumbleweeds." Maybe he was right. Maybe without me actively holding them together, they were perfectly content to drift apart from me. The next morning, I woke early as I always did, before the Arizona sun turned brutal. I made my coffee and sat at the kitchen table, watching the light creep across my backyard. My phone sat silent beside me. No good morning messages, no shared family memes, no questions about my day. The group chat that used to buzz with morning activity was quiet. I picked up my phone and opened the family chat, then stopped. Something was different. The group name had changed from Martinez Family Updates to Family Circle. Small change, but significant. I scrolled up to see if I had missed any messages. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. That's when I saw it. The message that changed everything. A group text from Carmen to everyone, visible in the chat for just a moment before it disappeared. New group without mom. Too much drama lately. Below it, a link to a new group chat. Then both messages vanished, deleted almost immediately. But I had seen them. I had seen the truth spelled out in stark digital letters. I sat there for a long moment, coffee growing cold in my hands. They had created a new family group without me. All this time, I thought I was losing my place in their conversations. In reality, they had moved the conversation somewhere I couldn't follow. I was no longer family drama they needed to manage. I was family drama they needed to avoid. I set my phone down and walked outside to my garden. The desert roses were blooming pink and white against the brown fence, and the morning glories were opening their purple faces to the early sun. Everything here was thriving, growing, beautiful. I had created this oasis in the desert with my own hands, and it flourished under my care. My family, the one I had raised and nurtured for decades, had decided I was the weed that needed to be removed from their perfect garden. I spent the morning tending my plants, watering, pruning, talking to them the way I used to talk to my children when they were small. The physical work felt good, grounding. The sun climbed higher, and the heat began to build. But I stayed outside, working through my emotions the way I always had, with my hands in the soil and my heart open to the sky. By noon, I had made my decision. I came inside, washed my hands, and picked up my phone. I didn't text the family group that I knew no longer included me. I didn't send angry messages or demand explanations. Instead, I scrolled through my contacts and found the number I was looking for. Richard Blackwood, the estate attorney who had helped Roberto and me with our wills years ago. I had spoken to him briefly after Roberto's funeral, but hadn't needed his services since then. "Mr. Blackwood," I said when he answered, "this is Khyla Martinez. I need to schedule an appointment to update my will." The conversation was brief and professional. He had an opening that afternoon if I could make it downtown. I said I could. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen for a few more minutes, thinking about the woman I had been and the woman I was becoming. For 71 years, I had bent myself around other people's needs, making space for their comfort, shrinking myself to fit their expectations. My children had learned well from watching me. They knew I would absorb their rejection quietly, that I would keep loving them no matter how they treated me. They were right about that. I would always love them. But love didn't mean I had to fund their futures or leave them the fruits of a lifetime of work and sacrifice. Love didn't mean I had to be grateful for scraps of attention or digital crumbs of inclusion. Love could have boundaries, and today I was going to draw some. I showered and dressed carefully, choosing a blue dress Roberto had always liked and the turquoise jewelry he had given me for our 40th anniversary. I wanted to look like the woman I was reclaiming, not the discarded family member they had decided I was. I drove downtown in my reliable Honda Civic, the radio playing old songs that made me smile. Phoenix spread out around me, desert mountains, rising in the distance, palm trees swaying in the perpetual sunshine that had drawn us here decades ago. Richard Blackwood's office was in a modern building near the courthouse, all glass and steel rising from the desert floor. I had been here before, years ago, when Roberto and I first wrote our wills. Then we had been a united front, making decisions together about how to provide for our children and grandchildren. Now I was alone, making decisions about how to protect myself from the family that no longer seemed to want me. Mr. Blackwood was a kind man in his 60s, with silver hair and patient eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He remembered me and expressed his condolences again about Roberto, even though it had been 5 years. We sat in his office overlooking the city, and I explained what I wanted to do. "I want to change my will," I said simply. "I want to remove my children as beneficiaries and leave everything to charity instead." He didn't seem surprised. In his years of practice, he had probably seen every family dynamic imaginable. He asked a few gentle questions about my reasons, not to judge, but to make sure I was thinking clearly. I explained about the group chat, about feeling excluded and unwanted, about realizing that my children saw me as a burden rather than a blessing. "This is a significant change, Mrs. Martinez," he said carefully. "Have you considered talking to your children about how you're feeling before making this decision permanent?" I had considered it. I had typed and deleted dozens of messages, rehearsed conversations in my mind, imagined scenarios where I confronted them about their behavior. But I knew my children. They would have explanations, excuses, promises to do better. They would make me feel guilty for being hurt, dramatic for being upset. They would gaslight me into believing that my perception was wrong, that I was being too sensitive, that I should be grateful for whatever attention they chose to give me. "Mr. Blackwood," I said, "I spent 43 years raising those children, teaching them about love, respect, and family loyalty. If they haven't learned those lessons by now, a conversation isn't going to change anything. This isn't about punishment. It's about dignity." He nodded and began pulling out the paperwork. We spent the next 2 hours going through my assets, discussing charities that were important to me, setting up the legal framework for my new will. I chose organizations that had meant something to Roberto and me over the years. The Children's Hospital, where we had volunteered during the holidays. The Animal Shelter, where we had adopted our beloved dog Max. The Scholarship Fund at Desert Ridge Elementary for students who couldn't afford school supplies. As we worked, I felt lighter, like I was shedding a weight I hadn't realized I was carrying. For years, I had felt responsible for maintaining family relationships, for being the bridge between siblings who barely spoke to each other, for keeping traditions alive that no one else seemed to care about. I had measured my worth by how much my family needed me, and when they stopped needing me, I had felt worthless. But sitting in that office, making decisions about my own future, I remembered who I was before I became someone's mother, someone's wife, someone's burden. I was Khyla Martinez, a woman who had worked hard, saved carefully, and built a good life through determination and love. My value didn't depend on whether my children included me in their group chats. My legacy didn't have to be tied to people who took my love for granted. When we finished, Mr. Blackwood walked me to the elevator. "Mrs. Martinez," he said, "I hope your family comes around. But if they don't, you should know that what you're doing today takes courage. Not everyone is willing to stand up for their own dignity." I thanked him and drove home through the afternoon heat, windows down, feeling the desert wind in my hair. The house was cool and quiet when I arrived, exactly as I had left it. But something fundamental had changed. I was no longer waiting for my phone to buzz with family messages. I was no longer measuring my day by whether anyone had thought to include me in their plans. I was free to be myself, to enjoy my own company, to build relationships with people who valued my presence instead of tolerating it. I made myself a late lunch and sat on my patio, watching the hummingbirds visit my flowers. Tomorrow, I would call the community center about volunteering more hours. I would sign up for the watercolor class I had been considering. I would reach out to my neighbor Elena, who had always been friendly, but whom I had never really gotten to know. I would build a life that didn't revolve around waiting for scraps of attention from people who had already decided I wasn't worth their time. My phone sat silent on the patio table, and for the first time in months, I didn't mind. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was full of possibility, full of peace, full of the quiet dignity of a woman who had finally learned the difference between being alone and being lonely. I was alone by choice now, not by exile, and that made all the difference in the world. The first sign that my family had noticed something was different came 3 weeks later, on a Thursday morning when the desert air still held the coolness of dawn. I was in my kitchen making fresh salsa with tomatoes from my garden when my phone rang. Carmen's name appeared on the screen, and for a moment, my heart did that old familiar flutter of hope. Maybe she was calling to apologize. Maybe she had realized how cruel their digital exile had been. Maybe she wanted to include me in whatever family event was being planned next. I answered on the third ring, keeping my voice neutral. "Hello, Carmen." "Hi, Mom." Her voice carried that careful tone she used when she wanted something. "How are you doing? We haven't heard from you in a while." I almost laughed. They hadn't heard from me because they had removed me from the only place where they might have heard from me, but I kept my response simple. "I'm doing well, mija. Just enjoying my retirement." "That's good. Listen, Mom, I was calling because Marcus has a school project coming up about family history, and he needs some old photos and stories about Grandpa Roberto. I was wondering if you could help us out." There it was, the real reason for the call. They needed something from me, and suddenly my existence was acknowledged. I looked out my kitchen window at the ocotillo cactus Roberto had planted when Marcus was born, its red-tipped branches reaching toward the sky like arms raised in celebration. My grandson was 15 now, the same age his grandfather had been, when he immigrated to this country with nothing but hope and determination. Of course, I said. I have plenty of photos and stories. When do you need them? Well, the project is due next week, so maybe this weekend? Could we come over on Saturday? I felt the old familiar urge to rearrange my plans, to make myself available whenever they needed me. I had a pottery class on Saturday morning and lunch plans with Elena, my neighbor who had become a dear friend over the past few weeks. But the old me would have canceled everything to accommodate my family. The new me had different priorities. I have plans Saturday morning, but I'm free after 2 o'clock, I said. There was a brief pause, as if Carmen hadn't expected me to have plans that couldn't be moved. Oh, okay. I guess 2 o'clock works. We'll see you then. After she hung up, I sat with my phone in my hands, feeling the weight of that small victory. I had set a boundary. I had honored my own commitments instead of automatically making myself available for theirs. It felt strange and powerful at the same time. Saturday arrived with the kind of perfect Arizona weather that made me grateful to live in the desert. My pottery class was held in a converted garage studio in Elena's neighborhood, taught by a patient woman named Rosa who had been throwing clay for 40 years. I had joined the class on Elena's suggestion, and it had become the highlight of my week. There was something deeply satisfying about working with clay, about creating something beautiful with my own hands, about the way the spinning wheel demanded complete presence and attention. I was working on a set of bowls, trying to get the walls thin and even, when Rosa stopped beside my wheel. Your centering is getting much better, Khyla. These bowls have good bones. I smiled, my hands still moving with the clay. I think I'm finally learning to trust the process instead of trying to control everything. That's the secret, Rosa said. Clay teaches us patience. It teaches us when to apply pressure and when to let go. After class, I drove home with clay still under my fingernails and a sense of accomplishment in my chest. Elena followed me to my house for lunch, carrying a container of her homemade pozole that had become our Saturday tradition. Elena was a widow too, 10 years younger than me but wise in ways that had nothing to do with age. She had lost her husband to cancer 2 years ago and understood the particular loneliness that comes with outliving your partner. We sat on my back patio, sharing the pozole and watching the roadrunners dart between the desert plants. Elena had a gift for comfortable silence, never feeling the need to fill every moment with chatter. We could sit together for long stretches, each lost in our own thoughts, without any awkwardness or obligation to entertain each other. Your family is coming today? Elena asked, ladling more pozole into my bowl. I had told her about Carmen's call, about the project and the photos. I had also told her about the group chat situation, though I had kept the details about changing my will to myself. Elena had listened without judgment, occasionally nodding in understanding or making soft sounds of sympathy. Yes, at 2 o'clock. Carmen and Marcus are coming to look through Roberto's photos and documents. That's nice that Marcus wants to learn about his grandfather. Roberto would be proud. He would, I agreed. Roberto always said that family history was a gift you give to the future. He used to tell Marcus stories about coming to America, about building his construction business from nothing, about how we met at a church dance when I was 19 and he was 21. Those are precious stories. I hope Marcus appreciates them. I hoped so too, though I wondered if my grandson saw me as anything more than a repository of information about his dead grandfather. When had I become just a keeper of old stories, instead of someone creating new ones? Elena helped me clear the lunch dishes, then headed home to give me time to prepare for my family's visit. I went into my bedroom and pulled out the large cedar chest Roberto had built for me early in our marriage. Inside were photo albums, letters, documents, and mementos from our 46 years together. I had organized everything meticulously, over the years, creating a careful archive of our family's history. I selected several photo albums and a folder of documents, then carried them to the living room and arranged them on the coffee table. The photos told the story of our life together, Roberto as a young man in his work clothes, building houses and dreams one brick at a time. Our wedding day, when I was 21 and believed love could solve any problem. The children as babies, toddlers, teenagers, family vacations to the Grand Canyon and California beaches, Christmas mornings and birthday parties and graduations. Looking at these photos now, I could see how central I had been to all of it. I was in most of the pictures, not because I was vain, but because I was the one holding everyone together, organizing the moments that became memories. I was the one behind the camera documenting everyone else's lives, but I was also the one who made sure the camera got turned around to include me. I had insisted on being part of the story I was helping to create. At exactly 2 o'clock, Carmen's silver SUV pulled into my driveway. I watched through the front window as she and Marcus got out, Carmen checking her phone before they walked to the door. Marcus had grown taller since I'd seen him last, his shoulders broader, his face showing hints of the man he would become. He looked so much like Roberto at that age that it made my chest tight with memory and loss. I opened the door before they could knock. "Hello, mija. Hello, Marcus." Carmen kissed my cheek in that perfunctory way that family members do when affection has become obligation. Marcus mumbled a hello and looked around the room like he was seeing it for the first time, though he had been in this house hundreds of times over the years. "I pulled out some albums and documents that might help with your project," I said, gesturing toward the coffee table. "Would you like something to drink? I have iced tea and lemonade." "Lemonade sounds good," Marcus said, settling onto the couch. Carmen declined anything to drink and immediately began looking through the materials I had prepared. I went to the kitchen to pour Marcus his lemonade, taking my time to arrange some cookies on a plate. When I returned, Carmen was holding a BO photo of Roberto standing next to his first work truck, a battered Ford pickup that had somehow managed to start every morning for 15 years. "This is perfect for the project," she said. "Marcus, look at this one. Grandpa looks so young and determined." Marcus took the photo and studied it carefully. "He does look young." "How old was he here, abuela?" 23, maybe 24. He had just started his construction business and was working 16-hour days, trying to establish himself. He was so proud of that truck, even though it was old and ugly. He said it represented possibility. "What kind of construction did he do?" Marcus asked, and I felt a flicker of hope that he was genuinely interested, not just going through the motions for a school grade. "Everything, at first. He built houses, repaired roofs, installed plumbing, painted walls. Whatever people needed, he learned how to do. He used to say that pride was a luxury he couldn't afford, that any honest work was good work." I sat down across from them and began pulling out more photos, telling the stories behind each one. Roberto's first big construction contract, the house he built for us when Carmen was a baby, the crew of workers who became like family, the business expansion that allowed us to send all 3 children to college. Marcus listened intently, asking questions, taking notes on his phone. Carmen seemed less interested in the stories than in identifying useful photos for the project. She sorted through the albums efficiently, setting aside images that would photograph well for Marcus's presentation. It struck me that she was treating this like a business transaction, collecting the materials she needed and moving on. "Mom, do you have any of Dad's immigration documents?" Carmen asked. The teacher said original documents would be good to include. I had brought out Roberto's naturalization certificate and the letter he had written to me when he was studying for his citizenship test. Carmen photographed both documents with her phone, then started packing up the selected photos. "Wait," I said. "Marcus, have you heard the story about how your grandfather and I met?" Marcus looked up from his notes. "I don't think so." Carmen glanced at her watch. "Mom, we really need to get going. Marcus has soccer practice at 4. But Marcus seemed genuinely curious. "I have time for one story, Mom." I ignored Carmen's impatient sigh and told Marcus about the church dance where Roberto and I met, how he was too shy to ask me to dance for the first hour, how we talked all night about books and dreams and the life we wanted to build together. I told him how Roberto proposed to me at that same church 6 months later, how nervous he was that he stumbled over the words and had to start over 3 times. "He sounds like he was really romantic," Marcus said, smiling. He was. He brought me flowers every Friday for 46 years, right up until the week before he died. White roses when we were dating, red roses after we married. Even when money was tight, even when he was traveling for work, he always found a way to bring me flowers on Friday. Carmen was clearly ready to leave, gathering the photos and documents into a folder. "That's sweet, Mom. Marcus, we really do need to go." Marcus hugged me goodbye, a real hug that lasted longer than I expected. "Thanks for all the stories, Abuela. This is going to be a great project." "You're welcome, mijo. I'm proud of you for wanting to learn about your family history." Carmen gave me another perfunctory kiss and headed for the door. "Thanks for this, Mom. We'll bring the photos back next week." After they left, I sat in my living room surrounded by the remaining photo albums, feeling hollow and used. They had gotten what they came for, extracted the information they needed, and left without any real connection or conversation about anything else. Carmen hadn't asked how I was doing, what I was up to, or whether I needed anything. She hadn't mentioned the group chat or acknowledged that they had been excluding me from family communications. She had treated me like a library, a resource to be consulted when needed and ignored otherwise. I put the photo albums back in the cedar chest, but I kept out one photo of Roberto and me taken on our 25th wedding anniversary. We were standing in front of the house he had built for us, his arm around my waist, both of us smiling with the confidence of people who believed their love could weather any storm. I had been 46 then, still young enough to think I understood how life worked, still naive enough to believe that being a good mother guaranteed your children's loyalty. That evening, I called Richard Blackwood at his home number, which he had given me for emergencies. I didn't think this qualified as an emergency, but I needed to talk to someone who understood the legal implications of what I was doing. "Mrs. Martinez, how are you? Is everything all right?" "I'm fine, Mr. Blackwood. I wanted to ask you about adding something to my will. A letter of explanation, maybe, something that would help my children understand my decisions." That's called an ethical will, or a legacy letter. Many people include them with their formal wills. It's a way to explain your values and reasoning without getting into legal complexities. "Yes, that's exactly what I want. Could you help me? Draft something like that?" We scheduled an appointment for the following week. After I hung up, I sat on my back patio and watched the sunset paint the desert mountains purple and gold. The evening air carried the scent of desert lavender and the distant sound of traffic from the interstate. Somewhere out there, my children were living their lives, sharing family moments in their secret group chat, making memories I would never be part of. But for the first time, that thought didn't break my heart. It made me angry, and anger was a much more useful emotion than sadness. Anger could be channeled into action. Anger could fuel change. Anger could give an old woman the courage to rewrite the story of her life, even if that story no longer included the children she had raised. I thought about Marcus and his genuine interest in Roberto's story, his real affection when he hugged me goodbye. Maybe there was hope for the next generation. Maybe the damage could be contained before it spread to the grandchildren. But I couldn't count on maybe. I could only count on myself, on the choices I made and the boundaries I set. The desert darkness settled around me like a familiar blanket, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to its pack. The sound was wild and free and utterly alone, but it wasn't sad. It was just true. And sometimes, I was learning, truth was enough. The community center buzzed with activity on Tuesday mornings when the senior enrichment programs were in full swing. I had been volunteering there for 6 weeks now, helping coordinate activities and sometimes leading my own workshops on desert gardening. The pay was nothing, but the purpose was everything. These were people who valued my knowledge, who listened when I spoke, who included me not out of obligation but out of genuine appreciation for what I brought to their lives. I was setting up chairs for the book club discussion when Jen approached me with a proposal that would change everything. Margaret was the center's director, an energetic woman in her 50s who had transformed the aging facility into a vibrant hub for Phoenix's growing senior population. She had salt and pepper hair that she wore in a no-nonsense bob, and eyes that missed nothing. "Khyla, I have something I want to discuss with you," she said, settling into one of the chairs I had just arranged. "I've been watching how you work with people here, how you organize activities, how you connect with everyone from the shy newcomers to the long-time regulars. You have a gift for this work." I continued arranging chairs, not sure where this conversation was heading. "Thank you, Margaret. I enjoy being here. It feels good to be useful again. That's what I want to talk to you about. We're expanding our programming, and I need someone to coordinate our new intergenerational initiative. It would be a paid position, 20 hours a week, bringing together seniors and local high school students for mentorship and skills exchange. The seniors share their knowledge and life experience. The students help with technology and current events. Everyone learns from everyone." I stopped arranging chairs and looked at her. "You're offering me a job." "I'm offering you a career. This isn't just about keeping busy, Khyla. This is about using your skills and experience to build something meaningful. I've seen how you work with people, how you make everyone feel heard and valued. That's exactly what this program needs." The idea excited me more than I expected. For months, I had been thinking about my life in terms of what I was losing, what was being taken away from me. Here was Margaret offering me something to gain, something to build, something that was mine to create and shape. "What would it involve exactly?" I asked. Margaret pulled out a folder thick with grant applications and program proposals. "We received funding to create a bridge program between Desert Vista High School and our center. Students would come here twice a week for workshops led by seniors who have expertise in everything from financial planning to cooking to auto repair. In exchange, the students would help our members with smartphones, social media, online banking, things like that." She spread out floor plans and schedules showing me how the program would work. "You would recruit and train the senior mentors, coordinate with the high school counselors, design the curriculum, and oversee the day-to-day operations. It's a significant responsibility, but I think you're exactly the right person for it." I thought about Marcus and his interest in Roberto's stories, about how hungry young people were for real connection with adults who had lived full lives. I thought about the seniors I had met at the center, people with decades of knowledge and wisdom who often felt invisible in a culture obsessed with youth and technology. "When would you need an answer?" "Take your time, but not too much time. I'd like to launch the program in 6 weeks, and we'll need at least 2 weeks to recruit and train mentors." That afternoon, I drove through my old neighborhood, past the house where I had raised my children. It looked smaller somehow, the desert landscaping overgrown, the paint faded from years of harsh Arizona sun. A different family lived there now, had lived there for almost 20 years, but I still thought of it as the place where I had been happiest, where Roberto and I had built our dreams brick by brick. I parked across the street and sat in my air-conditioned car watching children play in the front yard. A little girl, maybe 6 years old, was trying to teach a toddler how to ride a tricycle. Her patience and encouragement reminded me of Carmen at that age, how seriously she had taken her role as big sister, how carefully she had guided Miguel and Sophia through the mysteries of childhood. Where had that nurturing girl gone? When had Carmen become someone who excluded her own mother from family conversations? I knew the answer, of course. Somewhere in the busy years of career building and child rearing, my children had absorbed the lesson that older people were burdens to be managed rather than resources to be treasured. They had learned to see aging as decline rather than accumulation of wisdom. But Margaret saw something different in me. She saw experience as valuable, knowledge as worth sharing, age as an asset rather than a liability. The contrast was stark and illuminating. I drove home slowly, taking the long way through neighborhoods I hadn't explored before. Phoenix was full of surprises if you took time to look. Pockets of history tucked between modern developments, community gardens blooming in unexpected places, murals celebrating the city's multicultural heritage painted on walls most people never noticed. Elena was waiting on my front porch when I arrived holding a covered casserole dish and wearing the kind of smile that meant she had news to share. "I made too much enchilada casserole again," she said, though we both knew she had made it specifically to share. "I thought you might want some for dinner." We sat on my back patio with glasses of iced tea, watching the late afternoon light play across my garden. I told Elena about Margaret's job offer, about the intergenerational program, about how excited and nervous the opportunity made me feel. "That sounds perfect for you," Elena said. "You have such a way with people, and you know how to organize things without making it feel like work. Plus, working with teenagers would keep you young." I don't know if I'm ready for teenagers. It's been a long time since I've worked with young people professionally. "Khyla, you raised 3 children and helped raise I don't know how many students during your years at the elementary school. Teenagers aren't that different from any other human beings. They just need someone to listen to them and take them seriously." That evening, I called my sister Teresa in Tucson. Teresa was 5 years older than me and had always been my voice of reason, the one I turned to when I needed perspective on family dynamics. She had watched my relationship with my children deteriorate over the past year and had been frank in her assessment of their behavior. "They're taking you for granted, Hermana," she had told me after I described the group chat situation. "They think you'll always be there no matter how they treat you. Maybe it's time to surprise them." I told her about the job offer, about the possibilities it represented, about how it felt to be valued for my skills, rather than tolerated as a family obligation. "Take the job," Teresa said without hesitation. "Build a life that makes you happy instead of waiting for your children to remember how to love you properly. They're adults now. If they want a relationship with you, they can figure out how to earn it." But what if they never do? What if I focus on this new life and lose them forever? "Mija, you've already lost them. They removed you from their group chat, remember? They're treating you like an inconvenience. You have nothing left to lose and everything to gain." That night, I sat in my kitchen with a legal pad and made 2 lists. On one side, I wrote down everything I was afraid of losing if I took the job and built a new life for myself. On the other side, I wrote down everything I might gain. The second list was longer and more compelling. Independence, purpose, professional satisfaction, new relationships, the respect of colleagues, the chance to make a difference in young people's lives. The fear list was shorter but more emotional. The possibility of further alienating my children, missing out on family events I wasn't being invited to anyway, being seen as selfish for prioritizing my own happiness. I stared at those lists for a long time, then folded the paper and put it in my purse. Some decisions couldn't be made with logic alone. Some decisions required a leap of faith in yourself, in your own worth, in the possibility that the life you build for yourself might be better than the life others build around you. The next morning, I called Margaret and accepted the position. The relief in her voice told me she had been worried I might decline, that she really did see this program as needing me specifically, rather than just needing someone like me. "Wonderful, Khyla. I'm so excited to work with you on this. Can you come in Thursday morning? I want to introduce you to the rest of the team and start going over the details." After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen feeling simultaneously terrified and exhilarated. I was 71 years old and starting a new career. I was building something from the ground up, creating a program that would outlast me. making a contribution that had nothing to do with my role as mother or grandmother or keeper of family traditions. I called Elena to share the news, then drove to the community center to walk through the space where my program would operate. Margaret showed me the room that would be mine to design, empty except for folding chairs and tables, waiting to be transformed into a place where generations could meet and learn from each other. "We have some budget for furniture and supplies," Margaret said. "Nothing fancy, but enough to make it comfortable and functional. What do you envision?" I looked around the room, imagining teenagers and seniors working together, sharing stories, bridging the gap between digital natives and analog wisdom. I see comfortable seating arrangements that encourage conversation. Whiteboards where people can write down what they're learning from each other. Maybe a coffee station, because good conversations happen over warm drinks, and lots of natural light if we can manage it. I love it. Let's make it happen. That afternoon, I drove to Desert Vista High School to meet with the guidance counselor, who would help recruit student participants. The school was larger than I remembered, sprawling across what had once been empty desert, now home to 3,000 students from across Phoenix's west side. The counselor, Ms. Rodriguez, was a young woman who reminded me of Sophia at that age, earnest and passionate about helping students succeed. She walked me through the program proposal, explaining how students would receive community service credit and potential internship opportunities through their participation. The students I have in mind for this program are often the ones who struggle with traditional classroom learning, but thrive in hands-on, relationship-based environments, she said. Many of them are being raised by grandparents or have limited contact with older adults. This could be really meaningful for both generations. I thought about Marcus and his hunger for Roberto's stories, about how much richer his understanding of family history had become through our conversation. These students might not have grandparents willing or able to share their stories. The seniors at the community center might not have grandchildren interested in their wisdom. The program could fill gaps on both sides. We discussed logistics and scheduling, safety protocols, and learning objectives. By the time I left the school, I had pages of notes and a clear vision of how the program could work. More importantly, I had confirmation that this was exactly the kind of work I was meant to be doing at this stage of my life. That evening, I celebrated by making Roberto's favorite dinner, carne asada with fresh tortillas and pico de gallo. I set the table for one but used the good china anyway. Poured myself a glass of the wine Roberto and I had been saving for a special occasion. That never came before he died. I toasted to new beginnings, to courage, to the woman I was becoming at 71. As I ate, I thought about the letter I would write to accompany my will, the explanation Richard Blackwood would help me craft. I would tell my children about this job, about the life I was building, about the choice I had made to invest my energy in people who valued my contributions. I would explain that love doesn't have to be unconditional to be real, that respect isn't optional in healthy relationships, that removing someone from a group chat is removing them from your life. But I wouldn't write that letter yet. First, I would build this new life, prove to myself that I could create meaning and purpose independent of my children's approval. First, I would become the woman who deserved their respect, whether or not they chose to give it. First, I would show them what they had lost when they decided I was dispensable. The desert night settled around my house like a soft blanket, and I sat on my patio listening to the owls call to each other across the darkness. Tomorrow, I would start designing a program that would bring generations together. Tomorrow, I would begin building something that mattered. Tonight, I would simply enjoy the quiet satisfaction of a choice well made, a life being reclaimed one decision at a time. The phone rang at 7 a.m. on a Tuesday, jolting me awake from dreams of lesson plans and program schedules. I had been running the intergenerational program for 3 months now, and it had become more successful than any of us had imagined. Students were forming genuine friendships with their senior mentors, learning everything from traditional Mexican cooking to basic car maintenance to financial literacy. The local newspaper had written a feature story about us, and other community centers were asking Margaret for advice on starting similar programs. Sophia's name appeared on my phone screen, which was unusual enough to make me answer immediately. My youngest daughter rarely called, preferring to communicate through texts that required minimal emotional investment. When she did call, it usually meant she needed something urgent. "Mom, thank God you answered. I need your help." Her voice was tight with stress, the kind of controlled panic I remembered from her teenage years when she'd waited until the last minute to ask for help with a school project. I sat up in bed, instantly alert. "What's wrong, mija? Is everyone okay?" "We're all fine, physically. But Mom, I'm in serious trouble. David and I are getting divorced, and the lawyers are fighting over everything. I need to borrow money for legal fees, and I need it fast. The court date is next week." I had met David, Sophia's husband of 8 years, exactly 3 times. He was a quiet man who worked in tech and seemed decent enough, though he had always treated family gatherings like business meetings he was required to attend. I knew their marriage had been struggling, but Sophia had never confided in me about the details. "How much money are we talking about, Sophia?" $50,000. "I know it's a lot, Mom, but I wouldn't ask if I wasn't desperate. David's trying to hide assets, and my lawyer says I need to hire a forensic accountant to find everything. If I don't, I could lose half of what I'm entitled to." $50,000. Before my will changes, it would have been a significant portion of my savings, but something I could have managed. Now, with my assets designated for charities, the request felt different. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about what the money represented, about how my children saw me, about whether they valued me for anything beyond my ability to solve their financial problems. "Sophia, why didn't you tell me your marriage was in trouble? Why am I hearing about this divorce now, when you need money?" There was a pause, and I could hear her breathing, probably trying to figure out how to answer without admitting that she only called when she needed something. "I didn't want to worry you, Mom. And honestly, I thought David and I might work things out. But it's gotten really ugly, and I need help. You're the only person I can ask. What about Carmen and Miguel? What about your father-in-law who owns that successful restaurant chain?" "Carmen and Miguel don't have that kind of money, and David's family is supporting him, not me." "Mom, please. I know we haven't been in touch much lately, but you're my mother. Family helps family, right?" The irony was so thick I could taste it. Family helps family. Except when family removes you from group chats and excludes you from birthday parties and treats you like a dusty photo album to be consulted only when needed. But Sophia was desperate, and despite everything, she was still my daughter. "I need to think about this, Sophia. $50,000 is a serious amount of money." "What's to think about? Either you can help me or you can't. Either you care about your daughter's future or you don't." The manipulation was clumsy but effective, designed to make me feel guilty for not immediately opening my checkbook. It was the same tactic she had used as a teenager when she wanted expensive clothes or trips with friends. The difference was that now I could see it clearly, could recognize the emotional blackmail for what it was. I said I need to think about it. "I'll call you back in a few days." "A few days?" "Mom, I told you the court date is next week. I need an answer now." "Then the answer is no. If you need an immediate decision, then I can't help you. Good financial decisions require time and consideration." I hung up before she could argue further, my heart pounding with a mixture of anger and sadness. This was how my children saw me, as a bank account with emotions, a resource to be tapped in emergencies and ignored otherwise. Sophia hadn't asked how I was doing, hadn't mentioned my new job, hadn't shown any interest in my life beyond my ability to solve her problems. I made coffee and sat on my back patio, watching the sunrise paint the desert mountains gold and pink. The roadrunners were already active, darting between the ocotillo and palo verde trees in their endless quest for insects and small lizards. My garden was thriving in the October coolness, desert marigolds and fairy dusters adding splashes of color to the earth-toned landscape. My phone buzzed with a text from Sophia. "Mom, I'm sorry if I sounded pushy. I'm just scared and don't know what else to do. Please consider helping me. I promise I'll pay you back." I didn't respond. Instead, I drove to the community center early, needing the comfort of work that mattered, relationships that were built on mutual respect rather than financial dependency. The program room was already set up for the day's activities. Jennifer, one of my most dedicated volunteers, had arrived even earlier than usual to prepare materials for the cooking workshop. Jennifer was 78, a retired restaurant owner who had been teaching traditional Sonoran recipes to a group of fascinated teenagers. She moved slowly due to arthritis, but her hands were still steady when she demonstrated knife techniques or explained the difference between good and cheap ingredients. "You look troubled this morning, Khyla," she said, arranging ingredients for today's lesson on making tamales from scratch. "Everything all right?" I found myself telling her about Sophia's call, about the request for money, about the way my children seem to see me only as a solution to their problems rather than a person worthy of their time and attention. Jennifer listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding or making soft sounds of understanding. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment, her weathered hands still working with the masa harina. "My son asked me for money last year," she said finally. $20,000 to invest in some business opportunity that was guaranteed to make him rich. I gave it to him because he was my son, and I thought that's what mothers do. "Did he pay you back?" "He lost every penny within 6 months. Bad investment," he said. "Bad luck." But you know what hurt more than losing the money? He never apologized. Never acknowledged that I had sacrificed to help him. Never asked if I was okay financially after giving him such a large amount. The money was just something he felt entitled to because I was his mother. She shaped a small ball of masa with her palms, demonstrating the technique for the students, who would arrive soon. I learned something from that experience. Love doesn't require you to be a doormat. Generosity doesn't mean you have to say yes to every request. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let your children face the consequences of their own choices. The students began arriving for the cooking workshop, and I pushed thoughts of Sophia aside to focus on my work. Today's group included Marcus, who had become a regular participant after his school project introduced him to the program. He had formed an unexpected friendship with Harold, an 85-year-old retired mechanic who was teaching him about car engines, while Marcus helped Harold set up social media accounts to stay in touch with distant relatives. "Mrs. K, you look different today," Marcus said, using the nickname the students had adopted for me. "Are you feeling okay?" The fact that this 15-year-old boy had noticed my mood when my own daughter only called when she needed money wasn't lost on me. "I'm fine, mijo. Just thinking about some family stuff." "Family stuff can be complicated," Marcus said with the wisdom of someone who had navigated his own share of family drama. "Sometimes the people who are supposed to love you the most are the ones who hurt you the worst." I looked at him sharply. "That's very insightful for someone your age." "My parents are getting divorced too," he said matter-of-factly. "They think I don't know, but I hear them fighting about money and custody and who gets what. It's like they forgot they have kids who love them both and just want them to be happy." The parallel between Marcus's situation and Sophia's hit me hard. Here was a teenager showing more emotional maturity than my 43-year-old daughter, more concern for his parents' well-being than they seemed to have for his. "I'm sorry you're going through that, Marcus. Divorce is hard on everyone, especially children." "Yeah, but at least I have this place now. Harold and the other seniors here, they listen to me like what I think actually matters. They ask about my opinions and my dreams, not just my grades or whether I'm staying out of trouble. That afternoon, I had lunch with Elena at a small Mexican restaurant near the community center. She could tell something was bothering me, and I found myself explaining the morning's phone call, the request for money, the emotional manipulation disguised as family loyalty. "Are you going to give her the money?" Elena asked, cutting into her chile relleno. "I don't know. Part of me wants to help her because she's my daughter and she's in trouble. But another part of me is tired of being treated like an ATM instead of a person." "What does your gut tell you?" I thought about that question, really examined my instinctive response to Sophia's request. My gut tells me that giving her the money would be enabling her to continue treating me badly. That it would reinforce the idea that she only needs to contact me when she wants something. Then trust your gut. You've raised your children, Khyla. You don't owe them unlimited financial support for the rest of your life, especially when they can't be bothered to include you in theirs. That evening, I called Richard Blackwood to discuss adding a codicil to my will, specifically addressing requests for loans or financial assistance from my children. He listened patiently as I explained the situation with Sophia. "Mrs. Martinez, this type of situation is exactly why people make the kinds of changes you've made to your estate plan. Your children have demonstrated that they see you primarily as a financial resource. Continuing to provide that resource without requiring them to change their behavior toward you would be counterproductive." "But she's in real trouble, Mr. Blackwood. A difficult divorce can destroy someone financially." "And that's unfortunate. But Sophia is an adult who made adult decisions about her marriage, her career, and her finances. The consequences of those decisions are hers to face, not yours to fix." We added language to my will, making it clear that no loans or financial assistance would be provided to any of my children during my lifetime, and that any such requests would result in immediate removal from whatever small bequests I had left, them for personal items with sentimental value. 3 days later, Sophia called again. This time, Carmen was with her, which meant they had coordinated their approach. I could hear both their voices when I answered, though Carmen wasn't saying much. "Mom, have you thought about what we discussed?" Sophia asked, her voice carefully controlled. "I have, and I've decided I can't help you financially." "Can't." "Or won't. Both. I can't afford to give away $50,000, and I won't enable you to continue treating me like a bank instead of your mother." There was silence. Then I heard Carmen's voice in the background, though I couldn't make out the words. Sophia came back on the line, her tone sharper now. "What do you mean, treating you like a bank? I'm your daughter. I need help. That's what families do for each other." "Really? When was the last time you called just to see how I was doing? When was the last time you invited me to dinner or asked about my life? When was the last time any of you included me in your family group chat?" Another silence, longer this time. Then Sophia's voice, smaller now. "We know about the group chat thing. Carmen told me. But Mom, that was just because some of the conversations were getting complicated, and we didn't want to burden you with adult family business." "Adult family business like birthday parties and family dinners and weekend plans?" How exactly would knowing about my grandson's birthday party have burdened me, Sophia? "You're being dramatic, Mom. We just thought it would be easier for everyone if we handled some things separately." Easier for everyone? Or easier for you? Easier to exclude me without having to explain why? Easier to make plans without considering whether I might want to be included? I could hear them whispering to each other, and I realized this was probably the first time anyone had confronted them directly about their behavior. They had gotten so comfortable with my silence, my acceptance, of whatever scraps of attention they threw my way, that direct pushback seemed to have caught them off guard. "Mom, we're getting off track here." Carmen's voice came through the phone now. "Sophia needs help, and you're the only one who can provide it. We can talk about the other stuff later." "No, Carmen, we'll talk about the other stuff now, or we won't talk at all. I'm tired of being convenient when you need something and invisible when you don't." I'm tired of being treated like a piece of furniture in my own family. You're not furniture, Mom. You're being ridiculous. Am I? When was the last time any of you visited me just because you wanted to spend time with me? When was the last time you called to ask about my new job or my friends or what I'm doing with my retirement? When was the last time you treated me like a person instead of a problem to be managed? The silence stretched so long I thought they might have hung up. Finally, Sophia spoke, her voice thick with tears. We didn't realize you felt that way. Of course you didn't realize it because you never asked. You never check in with me unless you need something. You removed me from your group chat and thought I wouldn't notice or wouldn't care. You plan family events and forget to invite me, then act like it's no big deal. You treat me like I'm already dead, Sophia, except when you need money. That's not fair, Carmen interjected. We love you, Mom. Maybe you do, but you don't show it. Love isn't just a feeling, mijas. It's a choice you make every day about how to treat people. And your choices have been clear. I hung up before either of them could respond, my hands shaking with adrenaline and emotion. I had finally said the things I had been thinking for months, had finally confronted them with the truth about how their behavior affected me. It felt liberating and terrifying at the same time. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the conversation, wondering if I had been too harsh, if I should have handled it differently. But every time I considered calling them back to apologize, I thought about Jennifer's words, about Marcus's wisdom, about the respect I received from my colleagues and students at the community center. I deserved better than being treated like an emergency contact, someone to call only when life fell apart. I deserved to be valued for who I was, not just what I could provide. And if my children couldn't see that, if they couldn't treat me with basic respect and consideration, then maybe it was time for them to learn what life looked like without me in it at all. The first snow I had seen in Phoenix in 15 years fell on a January morning 6 months after my confrontation with Sophia and Carmen. It was barely more than frozen mist, melting as soon as it touched the ground, but the local news stations treated it like a miracle. I stood on my back patio watching the impossible flakes drift down through the desert air, thinking about how sometimes the most unexpected things happen when you've finally stopped waiting for them. I hadn't heard from either of my daughters since our phone call, though Marcus had continued coming to the intergenerational program. Through him, I learned fragments of family news. Sophia's divorce had been finalized. She had moved into a smaller apartment and taken a second job to make ends meet. Carmen's husband had been laid off from his engineering position, and they were struggling with mortgage payments. Miguel's wife was pregnant with their third child. None of them had called to share these updates with me directly. None of them had apologized for removing me from the group chat or acknowledged the years of exclusion and dismissal I had endured. They seemed to be waiting for me to make the first move, to reach out and pretend nothing had happened, to return to my role as the family member who absorbed slights without complaint and gave help without receiving respect. I wasn't going to do that anymore. The intergenerational program had grown beyond anything Margaret and I had originally envisioned. We now had a waiting list of students who wanted to participate, and 3 other community centers in Phoenix had started similar programs based on our model. The local newspaper had done a follow-up story, and I had been invited to speak at a national conference on innovative senior programming. At 72, I had inadvertently become an expert in something that mattered. More importantly, I had built a chosen family of colleagues, friends, and students who valued my presence in their lives. Elena and I had become inseparable, traveling together to Sedona and Flagstaff, taking cooking classes, exploring hiking trails that were manageable for women our age. Harold and Jennifer and the other senior volunteers had become my closest confidants. People who understood that wisdom doesn't expire with age. That experience is a gift worth sharing. The teenagers in the program had taught me more than I had taught them. They had shown me how to navigate social media in ways that built connections rather than reinforced isolation. They had introduced me to music and books and ideas that kept my mind sharp and curious. Most importantly, they had demonstrated daily that respect and affection could exist between generations when both sides approached each other with genuine interest rather than obligation. I was in my office at the community center, reviewing applications for the spring semester, when Margaret knocked on my door. She was carrying an envelope with my name written in handwriting I didn't recognize. "This was delivered to the front desk for you," she said. "No return address, but it looks official." Inside was a wedding invitation. Sophia's second wedding, scheduled for March in a small ceremony at a resort in Scottsdale. The invitation was formal and impersonal, the kind you might send to distant relatives or family friends whose attendance wasn't expected, but whose acknowledgement was socially required. I studied the elegant cardstock, the carefully chosen fonts, the request for the honor of my presence at an event I was clearly being invited to as an afterthought. No personal note, no phone call to discuss the engagement, no attempt to bridge the gap that had grown between us. Just an invitation that felt more like a notification. I set it aside and returned to my work, but the invitation nagged at me throughout the day. That evening, I called Teresa in Tucson to discuss it. "She's getting married again?" Teresa asked. "When did she even start dating someone new?" "I have no idea. I learned about her divorce through my grandson. I'm learning about her engagement through a wedding invitation." "Are you going to go?" I had been asking myself the same question all afternoon. Part of me wanted to attend, to support Sophia despite everything that had happened between us. But a larger part of me recognized the invitation for what it was. A gesture designed to make Sophia look like a good daughter without requiring her to actually behave like one. "I don't think so, Teresa. If I go, I'll be sitting alone at a table, full of strangers, watching my daughter marry someone I've never met, pretending everything is normal when nothing is normal. I'll be a prop in her wedding photos, proof that she maintained family relationships even after her behavior destroyed them. You could use it as an opportunity to rebuild the relationship. How? By pretending the last year didn't happen? By accepting scraps of inclusion and being grateful for them? I've spent too many years trying to rebuild relationships that other people kept tearing down. The next morning, I drove to Richard Blackwood's office to finalize the last details of my estate planning. We had been working together for months to create not just a legally sound will, but a comprehensive ethical letter that explained my decisions and values to anyone who might question them after my death. "Have you given any more thought to including your children in some small capacity?" he asked, reviewing the final documents. "Perhaps some personal items or family photographs." "I've thought about it extensively, but every time I consider leaving them something, I remember how they treated me when I was alive to see their reaction. If they don't value my presence in their lives now, I don't see why they would value my possessions after I'm gone." The will was simple and clear. The bulk of my estate would go to the community center to endow the intergenerational program in perpetuity. Smaller amounts would go to the animal shelter where Roberto and I had volunteered, the scholarship fund at Desert Ridge Elementary, and a new educational foundation focused on seniors in technology. Elena would receive my house and personal possessions, with instructions to offer family photographs and sentimental items to my children if she felt they would appreciate them. "Mrs. Martinez, this is a powerful document," Richard said, placing the finalized papers in a folder. "Your children may be surprised by these decisions, but no one could question the thoughtfulness behind them." "Good. I want them to understand that every choice has consequences, including the choice to treat family members as optional." That afternoon, I returned Sophia's wedding invitation with a brief note declining to attend due to a scheduling conflict. I didn't elaborate on what the conflict was, though it was simply my unwillingness to participate in ceremonies with people who had made it clear I wasn't wanted in their daily lives. 3 days later, Carmen called. Her voice was strained, as if she had been crying or preparing to cry. "Mom, Sophia got your response to the wedding invitation. She's really hurt that you're not coming. I'm sure she is, but I'm not available. That weekend. What could you possibly have planned that's more important than your daughter's wedding? The question revealed everything wrong with how my children saw my life. They couldn't imagine that I might have commitments, relationships, or priorities that didn't revolve around their convenience. They still thought of me as someone whose schedule was infinitely flexible, whose own plans were less important than their last-minute invitations. Carmen, I have a life now. I have work commitments and social obligations and people who depend on me. I can't drop everything for a wedding invitation that arrived 6 weeks before the ceremony with no personal communication about the engagement. She's your daughter, Mom. This is her wedding day. Yes, she's my daughter, but she's also someone who hasn't spoken to me in 6 months, who removed me from family communications, who only calls when she needs money. Why would you expect me to prioritize her special day when she doesn't prioritize our relationship any other day? Carmen was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was smaller, less certain. We know we haven't been perfect. Daughters. But we're trying to include you now. No, you're not trying to include me. You're trying to manage me. You want me to show up when it's convenient for you and disappear when it's not. You want me to be grateful for invitations to events where I'll be ignored and conversations where my opinions don't matter. That's not true. Isn't it? When was the last time any of you asked about my job? When was the last time you wanted to hear about my friends or my hobbies or what makes me happy? You don't want me in your lives, Carmen. You want the idea of me, the safety net of knowing I'm there if you need something. I could hear her crying now, soft sounds that tugged at my maternal instincts despite everything. But I had learned the difference between empathy and enabling, between love and self-sacrifice. I miss you, Mom. We all miss you. You miss the version of me that said yes to everything and asked for nothing in return. You miss having someone who absorbed your bad behavior without consequences. But that woman is gone, Carmen. I finally learned to value myself the way I valued all of you. So what happens now? Do we just never see each other again? That's up to you. If you want a relationship with me, you'll have to build one based on mutual respect and genuine interest. You'll have to include me in your lives because you want me there, not because you need something from me. You'll have to apologize for the years of excluding me and commit to doing better. And if we don't, then you'll continue living your lives without me, which seems to be what you prefer anyway. The only difference is that now you'll know it was your choice. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen for a long time, feeling the weight of that conversation settle around me. I wasn't angry anymore, wasn't hurt in the sharp way I had been months earlier. I was simply clear about what I would and wouldn't accept from people who claimed to love me. 2 weeks later, Elena and I were planning a trip to visit her sister in San Diego when my phone rang with an unknown local number. I almost didn't answer it, but something made me pick up. Mrs. Martinez, this is Dr. Stephen Chen from Phoenix Children's Hospital. I'm calling about your daughter Sophia Martinez Williams. She's been in an accident. The world shifted beneath me, all my careful boundaries and righteous anger suddenly meaningless in the face of a parent's worst fear. Sophia was in intensive care with injuries from a car accident, and I was listed as her emergency contact, despite everything that had happened between us. I drove to the hospital in a daze, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. All the hurt and disappointment of the past year felt petty in the face of possibly losing my daughter forever. Whatever our problems, she was still the little girl I had rocked to sleep, the teenager I had worried about during thunderstorms, the young woman whose dreams I had supported even when I didn't understand them. Carmen and Miguel were already in the waiting room when I arrived, their faces pale with worry and exhaustion. They looked up when I walked in, and for a moment, none of us knew what to say. "How is she?" I asked, settling into a chair across from them. "Still unconscious," Miguel said. The doctors say the next 24 hours are critical. We sat in the sterile waiting room as hours passed, taking turns going to the cafeteria, updating other family members, speaking with doctors who had little new information to share. Despite everything that had happened between us, we were united in our fear for Sophia, our love for her transcending our conflicts with each other. It was during one of those long, quiet hours that Carmen finally spoke about what had been between us. "Mom, I'm sorry. About the group chat, about excluding you, about all of it. We thought we were protecting you from family drama, but we were really just protecting ourselves from having to consider your feelings." Miguel nodded, his eyes red with fatigue and emotion. "We got so used to you always being there, always understanding, always putting our needs first. We forgot that you might need something from us too." I looked at my 2 remaining children, seeing them clearly for perhaps the first time in years. They were flawed people who had made selfish choices, but they were also my children, struggling with their own fears and insecurities, making mistakes the way all humans do. "I appreciate you saying that," I told them. "But apologies only matter if they lead to changed behavior. I'm not the same person I was a year ago. I won't go back to accepting whatever scraps of attention you're willing to give me." "We understand," Carmen said. "We want to do better. We want you in our lives, really in our lives. Not just when we need something." When Sophia woke up 3 days later, groggy but coherent, the first thing she asked for was me. I sat beside her hospital bed, holding her hand while she cried and apologized and promised to be a better daughter. I listened without commitment, without immediate forgiveness, but with the kind of love that survives even when relationships don't. Over the following weeks, as Sophia recovered and my children made genuine efforts to rebuild our relationship, I maintained the boundaries I had established while allowing space for cautious hope. They added me back to a new family group chat, but I participated selectively, sharing what I wanted to share without feeling obligated to respond to every message. They invited me to family dinners, but I attended only when I wanted to, not out of duty or fear of disappointing them. Most importantly, I kept my job at the community center, kept my friendships with Elena and Harold and Jennifer, kept the life I had built for myself independent of their approval. My children were welcome in that life, but they would never again be the center of it. The wedding invitation to Sophia's 3rd wedding, 2 years later, came with a personal phone call and a request for my input on planning. She had learned to include me in her life before expecting me to participate in her milestones. The man she was marrying was someone I had met and grown to respect, someone who understood that loving Sophia meant accepting her family, including the stubborn grandmother who had taught her daughter the difference between love and doormat behavior. At the reception, I sat at the family table, surrounded by children and grandchildren who asked about my work, my travels, my opinions on everything from politics to pottery. Marcus, now 18 and heading to college, introduced me to his girlfriend as my awesome great-grandmother who runs this incredible program bringing seniors and teenagers together. I thought about the woman I had been 3 years earlier, waiting by her phone for acknowledgement from people who took her love for granted. That woman would have been grateful for any invitation, any inclusion, any sign that she mattered to her family. The woman I had become expected more than that. She had built a life worth respecting, relationships worth maintaining, work worth celebrating. She had learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to accept less than you deserve, even from the people you love most. As Sophia danced with her new husband under the Arizona stars, I sat with Elena and watched my family celebrate. They were laughing and talking and including me in their conversations, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. It had taken 3 years and nearly losing each other completely, but we had finally learned how to be a family based on choice, rather than obligation. The desert wind carried the scent of orange blossoms from the resort gardens, and somewhere in the distance a coyote called to its pack. I thought about Roberto, about how proud he would be of the woman I had become, the life I had claimed for myself, the family I had taught to love me properly. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit, the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.